Got a co-op poppin', we on our paper route. We got a co-op poppin', we spread that paper route. We got a co-op poppin', building communities, linking up, expanding on opportunities. Grind together, shine together, we gon' get it poppin'. Spend together, win together, we gon' get it poppin'. Stand together, plan together, we gon' get it poppin'. Any climate, any weather, we gon' get it poppin'. Grind together, shine together, we gon' get it poppin'. Spend together, win together, we gon' get it poppin'. Plan together, stand together, we gon' get it poppin'. Any climate, any weather, we gon' get it poppin'.
And welcome to Women in Cooperation, Her Story in Black on the Co-op Nation Network. We're celebrating the power, resilience, and innovation of Black women working in the cooperative space or other spaces collaboratively in the spirit of cooperation to drive their missions, visions, and positive social impact forward. I'm joined by my co-host and partner in celebration, none other than the one and only Dr. Jessica Gordon Nembhard, who's agreed to honor this project with her presence as co-host, guest host, and advisory board support. She's a professor of community justice and social economic development in the Department of Africana Studies at John Jay College of the City University of New York in New York City. She's also author of Collective Courage, A History of African American Cooperative Economic Thought and Practice. Dr. Gordon Nembhard is a political economist specializing in community economics, Black political economy, and popular economic literacy. Let us bring her on and welcome her. Welcome.
Good day, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I keep saying it, but it's just a pleasure to work with you, LA. And I'm very, very excited about our guest, one of my sheroes.
Yes. Welcome back. And thank you again for honoring us with your presence in this project. It's been so much fun, hasn't it, so far?
Absolutely.
We're 3 episodes in.
We're learning lots, reinforcing a lot. It's just really a pleasure. Great conversations.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to welcome our next guest. Shirley Sherrod is a former Georgia State Director of Rural Development for the United States Department of Agriculture. She attended Fort Valley State College and later studied sociology at Albany State University in Georgia while working for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee during the Civil Rights Movement, where she met her future husband, Minister Charles Sherrod. She went on to Antioch University in Yellow Springs, Ohio, where she earned her master's degree in community development. She returned to Georgia to work with the Department of Agriculture in Georgia to help Black farmers keep their land. She's a land activist and co-founder of New Communities, a collective farm in Southwest Georgia. She's also director of Southwest Georgia Project and the Charles Sherrod CDC, combining or representing Shirley Sherrod Institute. She also is author of The Courage to Hope, How I Stood Up to the Politics of Fear. And she's so much more. And today we honor and celebrate her on Women in Cooperation, Her Story in Black. Welcome, Shirley Sherrod, to Her Story in Black.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here. We want to officially say that we appreciate you, that we honor you and your work and all of your contributions. And we celebrate you today in what little way that we can. There's so much to celebrate, but we definitely wanted to take some time to share in this space with you today.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
Welcome.
Yeah, sure. But just share with us a little bit of how your journey began as far as cooperatives and agriculture.
Well, I grew up on a farm, so I guess you can say that agriculture started really, really early because as a young girl growing up in a family where my father was a farmer and he and my mother kept having daughters, he really had to look to us girls to play a role on the farm. I can remember being about 5 or 6 years old before we got a tractor and helping my father to plant. He would run a planter. He would put me on the distributing seed. Well, he would run the distributed fertilizer, and I ran the plow that had the seeds. But I could only keep it in the row till it got to the other end, and then he would have to turn me around, and I could bring it back to the other end. I was just that young when
awesome.
our work on the farm started. So, that was my beginning. We were landowners, so the work on the farm was really, 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 really hard. I
Mhm.
can remember before we got electricity for the well, we had to pump, literally hand pump all of the water that not only the household needed, but the animals as well. So I grew up picking cotton and doing that work and dreaming of the day when I would get as far away from the farm. I didn't want to ever have anything to do with agriculture again in my life.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
wanted to get away from Baker County because of the system we had to endure there with the sheriff being that individual who just controlled everything and everyone.
Mhm.
So, as I was approaching high school graduation, being the oldest, my father didn't realize I wasn't talking about schools in the South. I was really talking about schools in the North because back then you had the feeling that if you went to school, you'd probably find your husband there. And I didn't
Mm.
want to take a chance on finding anybody from the South.
That is
So
hilarious.
anyway, but all of that changed. I was here in the office on Friday, and there was just something about Friday. I was telling one of the young women here, and it didn't hit me until later in the day. That was 59 years ago that my father was shot on our farm by a white farmer who was not prosecuted. And I just knew that I kept looking at the date as I would sign things or write things. There's something about this day, and it came back. He survived for 10 days and
Mhm.
died on the night of March, on the day rather of March 25th, 1965.
Mm.
I'm the oldest, as I said earlier, and I felt as the oldest, I needed to do something. That Baker County, if you ever get a chance to do any research on Baker County, Georgia, it has a long history with sheriffs there. And then the history also connects with someone from Atlanta, Robert Woodruff. He
Mm.
had a 33,000 acre plantation there, and some of the plantation land adjoined the land that we own. So it has a real bad history with the sheriffs, and during my lifetime, we experienced it with the sheriff who wanted to be called Gator, as in alligator. So on the night of my father's death, I felt I had to do something, something. I can remember my father had convinced my mother to try one more time for this boy. They had 5 daughters. We all had boys' nicknames for it. That was Bill.
You were Phil?
Yeah, I was Bill.
Oh, Bill.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, so he convinced my mother to try once more for this son. So during my senior year, she's sick all the time, didn't know what was going on. And finally, when the doctor confirmed she was pregnant, my father was giving out cigars and telling everybody, "This is the boy this time," you know. But he didn't, and it was my only brother. My mother was 7 months pregnant when he died, and my brother was actually
Oh.
born on my high school graduation date. But on that night, I was trying to decide, I got to do something. I have to do something. And the
Mhm.
thought just occurred to me as I got away from everybody. I just needed to be on my own. And I was trying to ask God why, and then trying to figure out what can I do. The thought occurred to me that I could give up my dreams of living my life in the North. I could stay in the South and devote my life to working for change. Now, the civil rights movement had not come into Baker County at that point. Charles Sherrod and the others from SNCC came in to work with us during the summer of 65. So in June of 65, they came in to help us create the Baker County movement and to deal with the Gator and many of the other things we were dealing with in Baker County. And I was told by my sisters, and my husband would tell me all the time, he said, "I saw your picture and I told your family I'm going to marry that girl." So a year and a half later, we were married. So it became
Wow.
my life's work. I didn't know when I made the commitment that night what I would do or how I would do it. I just knew I would stay and work.
Wow.
Yeah, that's incredible. And again, I know it's been years, but sorry for your loss. And
Yes.
yeah, March must be a hard month. You have
It
your own
is.
Ides of March, right? You have your own Ides of March.
Yes.
Whew.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm.
I was going to actually I was going to have you start with telling us about new communities, but actually maybe you should start with SNCC.
Yes.
And, we want to know about you as a Black woman and all you've been through. We also do want to talk about cooperatives and collectives and cooperation.
Mhm.
So, if, however you want to tell this story with those kind of focuses, but it would be great your experiences in SNCC. And I know we just lost Dory Ladner.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, a lot happening, but yeah, maybe. And in my book, which I tried to chronicle the history of Black co-ops, I do mention that SNCC did try to do co-op development. I think John Lewis
Yes.
did some work with
Yes.
SNCC in Alabama doing co-op and credit
Mhm.
union development and that kind of stuff. So we'd love to hear about your experiences in SNCC, and then if you want to lead us into why new communities, the early
Yes.
years of new communities, that would be great.
Yes. That work with SNCC actually led to the development of new communities.
Perfect.
We were organizing in all of these counties here in Southwest Georgia, and trying to help people to get registered to vote, trying to help people integrate schools, and all of the work we were doing even the work through USDA. You had the county committee system and trying to get Black people elected to that. So we were doing some of all of that work in those early years. And one thing we had to deal with was the fact that as some people who were living on land owned by white farmers and white plantation owners, I should add, Woodruff Plantation was one of them, they would put Black people off the land for participating in the movement. So that prompted us during the summer of 1968 to, as we discussed, what can we do about this? We sent 7 of our people to Israel. My husband was in the group to look at how they were resettling their people.
Mm.
They came back with the things they had learned, plus what we knew already, and decided to create an organization that would buy land, hold it in trust, and transfer it to local community development corporations. It's just that we got bogged down in the first piece of land, which was 6,000 acres. I can remember it was very empowering at the time to bring people together, to really plan the community they wanted to live in. So with 6,000 acres, there were to be 3 villages. We operated in committees. So there was a committee for the farm, committee for health, committee for education, committee for industry. And we had these groups of people working together as we were planning this community. We were fortunate to be able to get a planning grant from the Office of Economic Opportunity, OEO, to plan this community. And I can tell you it was very empowering. But I can also tell you that opposition surfaced from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that there were sometimes shots fired at buildings and other things happened to us during that time when OEO had promised us. I mean, we hired the consultants they said we needed to hire who were friends of the Nixon administration, and we did everything we were supposed to do. And at the end of that year of planning, we were supposed to get some major funding from the government. But by then, the opposition was so strong that they were afraid to give us a direct grant from Washington as they had done for the planning. And they told us that they didn't say no, but they said you have to go back through the normal process. The normal process is to get local permission,
Oh
get
boy.
state permission, and then they could provide the funds. Well, you should have been there to see when we went before the local, they had the TV station there and filming it and everything. And then for the state, Lester Maddox was the governor of the state of Georgia. So he vetoed all money coming into the state for our project, which was supposed to effectively kill it. And but those of us, many who were involved from the Northeast, didn't think we could make this happen without the government's money. So they said it just it's not, it's not going to happen. Those of us locally had never had our hands on 6,000 acres of land, and we said we are not going to stop. We're going to fight till the very end to hold on to it. We faced foreclosure for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, and my husband had gone back to Union Theological Seminary in New York, and one individual who was in school with him at the time ended up at, I think it was the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, and he actually worked with us to get some better financing, so that we couldn't get anything out of the government. No, you have USDA and all the programs that are there to assist farmers. We could get zero out of them, but with the help of Tom Warman and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, we could actually start farming. And because farming is what we knew, and to try to make this happen.
How long did that take from the time that, they said go back to local, from the time that you actually got the money? How long?
Oh, they were pretty. Oh, wait, now they didn't give us any more money. No. We didn't get any money. Lester Maddox blocked all money coming into Georgia for this project.
Okay.
So here we were with 6,000 acres of land, no money, and facing foreclosure. Prudential Insurance Company held the first mortgage. So we faced foreclosure during those 2 or 3 years, and my husband was running about the country asking people to help us. We were able to keep foreclosure from happening, but then finally, because of Tom Warman and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, we were able to get some better financing. We could get equipment. We could get money to buy the supplies and input for farming. And we, so we started farming. By now it's like 1973, and we started this in 69.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I often talk about, and you're giving us a great example of how, civil rights and economic justice, economic rights have to go hand in hand, right? And so often when we're, engaged in voting rights and civil rights, we got retaliated against. And so we, Fannie Hamer talked about this too. We have to own our own land. We have to do things collectively, because that's the only way we'll have the power to do both the political and the economic work that we need to do. And you guys kind of lived that out. Can you say why you chose the community land trust model? I know you said you studied a similar model in Israel, right?
Yeah, well, we know that, as Black people, we used to own over 15 million acres of farmland, and we have less than 2 million acres today. And one of the main reasons for the loss would be mortgaging something, and then white people end up taking your land. So our goal was to have it where we would have the land forever and ever. We would own it together. I can remember a lot of those discussions. You used to have these insurance people going around collecting $1, whatever, for little insurance, and they going into folks' houses and trying to get them to understand if they participated with us, they wouldn't have anything. And we are promoting the idea of collectively owning the land. You would get a long-term renewable lease on the home that you build. So you would always own the home, unless you decide to sell it back to our organization, but you wouldn't lose the land. We felt it was the one way we could make sure we had this land forever and ever.
Yeah, love it. It's still a fantastic model.
Model.
I don't know if you want to finish the story of New Communities. I know
Yes.
a lot of different things happened throughout the
Yes.
last, whatever, 30, 50, is it 50 years now? Anyway.
Yes. We celebrated 50 years in 2019.
Right.
at 50 years of the community land trust model, because we created the first one in the country. And we had a lot there. My understanding is there are more than 300 at this point using the model we created. And they were so happy to learn that that was created from the civil rights movement. And they're using that model in cities like New York and Miami and many, and even Atlanta, using that community land trust model that we created out of need. But anyway, we started farming, and I tell you, we encountered um, so much from white people. Back then we were using liquid fertilizer, for example, and you wouldn't know that you paid a high price, but wouldn't know that you didn't get what you ordered until the crop was up. It would be at varying heights throughout the field, and you knew it had to be that liquid fertilizer that you ordered. It prompted us to have to pull a sample from every delivery to get it analyzed. You know, we would catch them sometimes. I remember, when it rains heavily, a lot of times people working on the farm don't work that whole day. So the young man who was in charge of the swine went to check on his hogs, and there were these white people loading pigs into their car, and he came rushing to the office, and we called the sheriff, and they really stopped them in the next county. But realizing we were Black people, they said, "Oh, these are the wrong folks." We've caught them actually stealing. I can remember they caught one man with an armload of corn, and the first thing he said coming out of the field was, "I'm not stealing." You know, but there were, getting the right price for the crops once they were grown, getting the right grade for the crop, because you got paid more based on the grade of peanuts, for example. There were just many, many things they did to us through the years, and we could not look to the Department of Agriculture for any help. I remember with that corn, we called them out. The extension agent knew what the deal was, but he would have been going against a white person in business and wouldn't assist us with that. So we had to really depend. We were fortunate. One of my uncles who grew up on the farm in Baker County, who had gone on to become an extension agent under the University of Georgia system in Harris County, where he could not work with white farmers. He could only work with Black farmers. He actually came to work with us and really let us. We had muscadine grapes when no one else had them. We had a 75 brood sow operation, and we, instead of just raising those hogs and taking them for sale, we would take them to be slaughtered, brought them back to the farm, and we were known for the cured meats and the sausage and bacon and so forth we actually set up an operation right by US Highway 19, where people could come in and see an old-fashioned smokehouse. We had sugarcane grinding and syrup making operation by the highway. So we did a lot of things helping to lead not only our people who were involved, but farmers in the area who needed the help that we could provide. So things were really going well. They were going quite well. We couldn't build the homes. We couldn't implement the rest of the plan, for example, but we could expand. We could make enough money to expand the farming operation and pay all of the land debt. So it looked like we were at least on a roll with holding on to the land. And then in I think it was around 76, 77, there was a drought. We had never been to farmers. We couldn't go to farmers' home for money. All farmers who experienced a drought, we later found even those plantations that were farming got that emergency loan money that was denied to us. Because when we finally went after the second year, the county supervisor said, "You'll get a loan here over my dead body." So it put us into a 3-year fight just to try to get an emergency loan. But if you're having continued drought and you're farming 2,000 acres like we were, it was devastating to trying to keep the operation going. And then this is how Black farmers have lost land through Farmers Home Administration. So there's something called a county committee system. And supposedly, farmers are nominated and elected by landowners in the county, where you'll always have more of them than Black people. And then that county committee would receive all of the programs through Farmers Home and would actually approve a farmer for a loan back in those days. So if they allowed a Black farmer to borrow money, he couldn't get what the plan called for. And then they had to have a lien on all available assets. So once they get a lien on all available assets, then they can lead you straight to foreclosure.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with us.
Oh,
So we were in a 3-year fight just to get the loan. And once they got a lien on everything, then they could engineer the foreclosure. So in 1985, we lost everything. We had assets worth between $4 and $5 million. They let a white guy out of Atlanta buy it for $1 million. And then when we later were doing research on it, we found that they let him borrow $950,000 of that. So he only put up $50,000. Then he dug holes and pushed all of our buildings over. And he then broke it up into tracts and sold it. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. What a sad story. But you sued.
Yeah, but in between that, I started working with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And this is, I can remember the first cooperative I organized was in my home county. These were men who had been friends of my father. They knew me from a young girl growing up. And so I'm trying to work with these guys to get them organized. And they wanted to do a feed a pig project. And they assured me they knew how to raise hogs. And I kept telling them, if you get these hogs through the heifer project, you're going to have to agree to some training. But they assured me they knew what they were doing. Well, the first set of hogs came in. I'll never forget this. This is really something. They decided we got 15 sows and 3 boars. So they decided 3 farmers would get 5 sows and a boar. And what they had to do was pass on 2 for 1. So, but as bad luck would have it, the guy from the Heifer Project came the very next day and wanted me to take him out to these farms. So we went to the first farm and conditions were bad. We went to the second farm. They were even worse. And I was about to tell him we were going to the third farm where the farmer had hogs being raised on concrete, because the farmer had bragged so much in the meeting about the raising hogs on concrete. The Lord kept my mouth closed. I'm so happy. Because when we got there, he did have them separated from his hogs, but there's this big open area and there's a lot of water out there. And he's saying, well, that water's coming from my from my kitchen sink. I'm like, oh Lord. And then there was lots of glass out there. And he's so proud of what he had. He said to the guy, do you want to see my other hogs? And of course he said, yeah. He kept trying to call the hogs, even put some feed out. They didn't move. He found the winner. He kicked 1 or 2 of them. They got up hopping. I'm like, oh gosh. So then he wanted to show us his hogs on concrete. The concrete had broken up, so it's the one that the hogs were not cutting themselves. And then the water was dripping down on them, but that was going out of the pen, and other hogs were wallowing in it. So the guy said to me, there's some serious problems here. And I said, let me tell you what they are. I wanted him to know I knew better.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, but give me a chance now. Maybe I can get extension to come in, the University of Georgia Extension, to come in to do some training for me. The guy wouldn't even talk to me. So, and then Fort Valley, you know, those 1890s don't get the funding that the 1862s, like the University of Georgia, get. The University of Georgia has an extension agent in every county. Fort Valley State cannot afford to have one in every county. So I said, that's okay. So I went into this next meeting and I started doing the training. And I'll never forget, at the end of that first night of training, they said to me, you know how to raise hogs, don't you? I didn't ever have another problem with them. You know, as a woman in this work, you know, I had to prove myself to them. And I've done that through the years as I created other cooperatives here in this area.
You're listening to Women in Cooperation, Her Story in Black on the Co-op Nation Network.
So I started working with farmers initially in USDA gave us a grant for the first time through the Federation to work with farmers in a 5-county area that were having problems, you know, and that's financial problems with the agency. But I looked at it, you know, I'm an organizer. Hey, this gives me money now. I can bring on staff. It's more than just me. And we really started. I did the work that had to be done for that 5, but that work spread over other counties, and that led to the Federation getting additional funding to work in more counties in Georgia, and then later, based on the work we were doing here, additional money to do the same work in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. So I was managing the staff working with farmers in the 4-state area.
That's fantastic.
And because of that, and because we were still losing land, we were working on alternative markets. I can remember there was an state auction market in Thomasville, Georgia. Black farmers couldn't take their produce through there and get it sold. They could allow a white farmer to buy their field for almost nothing, take it through there and get it sold. So it prompted us to reach out. We connected with a group out of Boston, Massachusetts called Red Tomato. They needed seedless melons. We trained our farmers to grow seedless melons in the Boston, Georgia area. So we started shipping seedless melons from Boston, Georgia to Boston, Massachusetts. Later on, Ben & Jerry's, the Ben & Jerry's ice cream company, said they wanted to do something to help with Black land loss. So they said they could buy pecans or peaches, where we were not growing peaches. So I organized farmers to sell to Ben & Jerry's. We called it Southern Alternatives. We created that cooperative. But the problem was we couldn't find a sheller in the area who would process the pecans for us. I mean, we went to everyone and they would say things like, tell you what we'll do. We will buy the pecans from Black farmers. We will sell them to Ben & Jerry's, and they can say they have pecans from Black farmers in their ice cream. That was no different from what was happening. So I finally had to tell them it's just not possible for us to find anyone. So they then strong-armed their major supplier to do the processing of the pecans for our farmers. And each year we would negotiate the price. It would be either 25 cents per pound above market or 30 cents. And I convinced the farmers to save half of that premium price and they acquired their own facility in 1997.
Oh, cool.
And
Cool. You
then
know, my
because
mother used to buy pecans from them. She
is
used to
that
make,
right?
she used to buy, I think it was 5 or 10 pounds of pecans because she made
Oh
Christmas
wow.
cookies with them and stuff. But I remember that label. So when I went to a
Hmm.
Federation meeting once and saw their name, I was like, oh my gosh, my mother used to
Yes.
buy, you know, in New York. My mother was in New York ordering
Oh wow.
from them. So I don't know how she learned about them, but she was definitely in solidarity.
Yes. Yeah, we were putting it out there. And it was women toward the end who really made it work. But anyway, because we were still losing so much land, no matter what we did, all the training, all of the alternative markets, that a lawsuit was necessary. So there was one that led to the Pickford case. Everyone is familiar with Pickford. Tim Pickford was a farmer out of North Carolina that we had worked with. Um, so the government kept indicating once it was filed that they were willing to settle. They knew the things they had done wrong through the years. So that settlement called for A and B. A farmers wouldn't have to use much to prove discrimination, and supposedly would get 50,000, get their debt written off, get priority for for the programs and so forth. The sticker was you had to find a similarly situated white farmer who got the loan you didn't get.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
So that really hurt a lot of farmers. With B, the claim wasn't limited, it was what you could prove. So we were busy because there were no ads or anything in the Federation. We were throughout the South trying to help farmers gather the information they needed to file a claim in Pickford because you only had 6 months. 3 months into that process, I'm driving from Alabama one night and the light bulb went off. Oh my goodness, we were farming in 1981. New communities can file a claim in the Pickford case. And the years were 81 to 96, so it didn't cover every farmer. And it was 81 to 96 because when Ronald Reagan became the president, he abolished the Office of Civil
Oh,
Rights at USDA. So we filed our claim before the deadline. 10 years later, before we got justice, I can tell you that the lawyer who was working for the Justice Department in the case against us was arrested 2 years after our hearing in California. Turns out she wasn't a lawyer after all.
What?
oh my God.
Yes,
Oh my goodness. What did y'all
yeah.
do while you were waiting for?
All we could do was wait. It just took
Mm.
forever. They had to. They denied our claim. If you'd been in the courtroom that day, you would have left there like we did, saying, "Oh, we just won," but we were denied. We appealed, and the monitor the judge had appointed was from Minnesota. I had served on her board, so she had to recuse herself. So they had to get someone else to handle our appeal. So between finding someone else and getting that final report, that was 2000. It took 4 years. So from 2002 to 2006. And then in 2006, I mean, I wish you could see the document outlining all of the stuff that he found that we knew was there. I mean, it almost makes me cry now when I read it because he discovered all of these things that really happened to us. So on the night of July 8th, 2000, we filed in 1999. 2008, July the 8th, we got a call from our lawyer that night saying we had won. And
Whoa.
she asked me, "Do you want to guess how much?" I said, "Is it at least 1 million?" She said, "No, it's 12." You
Whew.
know,
Whew.
and
Yeah.
yes, it really became closer to 13 because one of the things he did, the adjudicator did, is he ordered them to give us back every penny we had paid on our loan.
Ah,
Wow.
Yeah,
cool. Wow.
yeah. So
That's
we
a
started looking for
fantastic,
more land.
right? A fantastic judgment. I mean, it doesn't really make up for the fact that
Mm,
you lost everything you put in,
Yeah.
but at least it was a fair judgment.
Mhm.
yes, yes,
So how much
yeah,
land did you then buy to restart
yes.
everything?
So we couldn't go back. Of course, the original plot wasn't open to us. Plus, we didn't want to be in Lee County. That's one little racist county. They've taken most of the white population of Albany just across the line. I could ride, a few blocks and you're in Lee County, and all the white people have moved across that line, north and west. And that's why Albany is now probably about an 80% Black, has about an 80% Black population. But so there was no question in anybody's mind about whether or not we wanted to go back to Lee County. That was out. And we started looking for more land. I have to tell you, though, during that same month, that was July 8th, July the 30th, I got a call from the White House saying that I had been selected as Georgia State Director of Rural Development for USDA. We had never had a person of color in the position before. And at this point, I didn't want to do it because we just got the award.
Yeah.
But I knew if I didn't do it, I didn't know when we'd ever get a person of color to break that color line there with the agency. So I went on to start working. The money had not come in at that point, but I went on to make my mark at USDA, and Breitbart took care of that less than a year later. But we found that this Cypress Pond plantation, the property line comes right up to the city limits of Albany. The previous owner, invented the system for paying for fuel at the pump. And he died in 2008 from ALS. And if you remember, the economy had sort of tanked around that time, because when he died, they had put the property on the market for $21 million. When we found that it was on the market, one of the young men who grew up on the property in Lee County, the 6,000 acres, worked for FedEx. He found that it was on the market, so we went out to look at it one Sunday morning. The salesman came from Tallahassee. If he had been from Albany, we wouldn't have been able to get it. But he wasn't from here, so he didn't have all of that history with us. So he's riding us all over the place and saying they had dropped the price to 6.9, and he kept saying, just make an offer. He said the corporation is holding it, they're ready to get rid of it. So my husband, who was in the group at the time, to see if they'll take $5 million. Well, they let us know the next day they would take $5 million for it. And
nice.
But they didn't want to include the equipment. It gets better, y'all.
Of course it does.
So I had a problem because you have this big 13,000 square foot antebellum home on the property, and I just had such a problem with antebellum. So I was resisting this. And because I was resisting it so much, they said, well, let's get a consultant to help us make a decision between these two pieces of property we were looking at. And that consultant came back and said, you have to get Cypress Pond Plantation, but you can get it for less than $5 million, and you can make them include the equipment. And I'm talking tractors and trucks and so forth. So we started playing hardball. And we got everything. It's 1,638 acres of land. There's an 85-acre lake. As I told you, there's that 13,000 square foot antebellum home that was built, the original portion in 1851. There are cabins on the lake with docks going out onto the water. Just a prime piece of property. So we finally got everything, including the equipment, for $4.5 million.
Wow.
Nice.
Wow. Wow.
And I can tell you all, it was almost like this was not happening for us when you look at all that we had been through. And I was really afraid. I was really afraid that when the word got out, generally, they would come and do things to us. There was a thunderstorm. I'll never forget. It was about 2 weeks later, really bad thunderstorm, and all of those alarms were going off out at the property. Those calls were coming into our house. And my first thought was, this is when they're going to burn that antebellum house down.
Yes.
But so it was from that point that we we decided we had to have security there.
Right.
So there's no one actually living on site, but security is there every night.
Right.
Even
Wow.
now.
Even now. And that's a
Wow.
cost we just have to bear.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
And are you farming again now?
Oh, yes, big time, and lots of training that we're doing. And we're trying to introduce different crops and new crops for our area to farmers. So there were 85 acres of pecan trees, and those trees, those at 85 acres, they're at least 112 to 115 years old, but still producing pecans. We added 115 acres to take it up to 200 acres.
Mhm.
So that was some of the first work we did. We put in muscadine grapes again, so we have grapes for pick your own and all, but we are now adding grapes for wine making. We have bees, so we have honey.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Okay.
we have truffles of all things.
What?
Yeah, so we have 5 acres of truffles. We're growing rice, cooperating with a group out of Louisiana that's using less seed, less fertilizer, less chemicals, and not having to flood the field. So you're using less water and all. And we've had great success with the rice growing. So having workshops to introduce farmers to these new crops that we are bringing on. We're about to add cattle. We are adding blueberries. So crops that our farmers can grow and not have the need for all of this big equipment that's
Right.
required
Right.
for growing the other crops. We also have organized farmers. When we looked at Georgia's tourism trail, you didn't see a lot of Black folks. So we have organized a Black farmers agritourism trail.
Hmm.
And we've been working with farmers, getting them prepared to have people visit their farms either to stay or for the day.
Oh, that
And
Nice.
there,
sounds great.
other
Yeah.
things. Oh, the set. So, oh, that's right, the oranges.
Ah,
In
Yes.
2012, we planted Satsuma oranges. I'm thinking we need to plant even more because we have lots of people who are interested in our crop. So the oranges sold. We didn't have any to sell locally because all of them sold this year. We're also Ben and Jerry's. The company is back in the picture again. These two
oh,
women. One is a board member and one is a consultant, and they contacted me about 2 years ago, and they want to develop this relationship with new communities to initially look at purchasing pecans, but also to look at other crops that are grown. So they want to work through us to have us help to market. They don't use everything, but they have vendors that they deal with.
right.
Right.
So it looks like this year we sold all of our pecans this year.
Wow.
So they are allowing us to work with another group to actually purchase from them to make this project get started this year.
Oh,
So,
okay.
That's
Right.
exciting.
they're back in the picture again.
How many
Terrific.
farmers are you working with?
So let me explain the whole process. So when I told you about the Southwest Georgia project, that was the organization coming out of SNCC.
Oh,
When
okay.
my husband came here in 1961, he was one of the founding members of SNCC, and the work was known as the Southwest Georgia Project. He recruited a lot of white people to work with us in the early years. So when Stokely came on and said all white people had to leave SNCC and go work in their own community, we had a major, I can't remember how many, out of Union Theological Seminary in New York, and this was part of their ministry. So we, at that point, separated from SNCC and incorporated the Southwest Georgia Project for community education. So
Mhm.
that work, that organizing work is still going on, working with people on issues in their communities. So it might be, we played a major role to get out the vote when Ossoff and Warnock were elected. And so we played a major role there in organizing about 17 counties to get out the vote from the rural area. That's
Okay.
work of the Southwest Georgia Project. Southwest Georgia Project also work with farmers, organizing them, helping them to access programs through USDA. And then once they're approved, helping them to get those practices implemented on their
They're fine.
farm. So that organizing work is ongoing. It makes it where New Communities doesn't have to get out there and
That's it.
organize the farmers. We can put the training at New Communities on the farm. And then of course we don't know why we made New Communities a 501c4, but and we lost all of our records in the flood of '94. So we then didn't have lawyers didn't advise merging the Southwest Georgia Project and New Communities. So that called for creating the 501c3, which is the Charles Sherrod Community Development Corporation. So that's why there are these three organizations.
Okay.
It can be confusing. So we operate as the Sherrod Institute.
Nice.
Right. Yeah. So do it all together. Put that ecosystem together.
That's right. So wow, do you feel like from then till now, has enough changed in terms of, I don't know, policy, advocacy, attitudes, resistance, all of that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it looks like things change and then they remain the same or get worse. We just had a meeting Saturday on broadband trying to inform our people living in the rural area about all this money that's coming in for broadband and how we have to stay on the electric membership corporations and the other groups that's getting them to make they do the right thing for our communities. You know, I can give the example of my home county. My mother, 11 years after my father's death, she became the first Black elected official in the county. She ran for a seat on the Board of Education and was elected. And I just have to tell you this little funny thing about her first meeting. She was, so these are all white men, and she's there for her first meeting, and the superintendent said something like, "I want to introduce you to our newest member. Her name is Grace Hall Miller." So this old white man on the board said, "Is that the nigger Joe Hall?" And so she said,
Wow.
then he went on to tell the story how my grandfather found his wallet somewhere and then found him. And he said all the money was there, trying to make the point that he was an honest nigger. So my mother said she said, because there were some younger white men, she said, he's old. And she's letting him know, I'm gonna let him get by with that. But she said, Dwayne, if you say it, then she started talking about cracker and all the other things we say. But she played a major role for 36 years on that. And the year we talked to her children, said, well, just let someone else come on. We didn't know that the white Tea Party was organized and they could never be successful as long as she was there. That board flipped that year from 4 Blacks and 1 white to 4 whites and 1 Black. They don't have a child in the school system, didn't go to school there because they all went to private schools. And so you have this system down there now where they are more interested in sports than in the education our children are receiving in that county. And, you know, the community met for years. When they couldn't make a breakthrough, I spoke at Emory Law School and found Kathleen Cleaver there. And Kathleen and some of her students helped us to get a lawyer pro bono for that county to help them. Because they wouldn't let them speak at meetings and so forth. He filed a lawsuit, Second Amendment right lawsuit that they won, but you know, so we were fighting. We tried to do a recall. A busload went up there to talk with the state attorney general, and it's a local matter. No one was willing to touch it. We had to start organizing for the next election. You know, it's just been, you see these struggles going on in all of these counties now. And it's hard to pull our people together to fight over and over. This was 2012, and here we are at 2024. So to keep, they still meet twice a week now. I mean, twice a month now. They used to meet every Monday night in that county. But just to think, to keep people interested and keeping them fighting the system for so long, where you earn, have a little success or no success at all, is really difficult.
Yeah, the struggle continues, huh?
Yes, it does.
So one of the things that we ask, well, two things, I guess maybe then we'll start to close out. One thing is just, is there another woman that you would like to lift up? You've lifted up several of them throughout the conversations, but anybody in particular that comes to mind, and then something around courageous conversations we'll ask you after that.
So I can tell you that during the summer, during July of 2000, 5 of us met at the Ford Foundation to talk about a Southern Rural Women's Initiative. 3 were from Mississippi, 1 was from Alabama, and I was from Georgia. We decided we would really try to create a project to work with Southern rural Black women, not just Southern rural women, Southern rural Black women. So Olita Fitzgerald from over in Mississippi was one of them. Sophia Bracy Harris, Billie Jean Young. I can't remember the 2 people who have passed, but we all started working together, and we decided we thought we could get this job done in 5 years. So we asked the Ford Foundation to give us some major money after a year of planning and listening sessions and so forth. And we wanted $10 million for asset development in the rural, these 3 certain counties in Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama. Right around the time when they were considering that 9/11 happened, and it looked like we wouldn't get anything at all. But they eventually said to us, well, if you can come up with 500,000, we'll give you $1.5 million. So we put together programs, a Black Women's Hall of Fame, where women in these communities actually nominate women that you've never heard of, outside of the area, because of the work that they've done. Women in ag, helping women to get back to growing food and working together to do that. Women in ag, Southern Journeys, we created a worker-owned sewing cooperative, make some beautiful stuff. And I always leave one of the areas out. But anyway, here we are. We were here on Saturday looking at broadband and the money that's coming in and making these cooperatives come and talk to us, the electric membership cooperatives. And Olita was texting me on the way back home. And I said, do you know, Olita, 24 years later, 1 more year, a quarter of a century, we've been working and staying together, organizing women in these states. So the names I mentioned, Olita Fitzgerald, Sophia Bracy Harris, these are women I have worked with. Before that, I'm working with men who were farmers and had to work through men to help deal with the women on some of the issues. But we, almost a quarter of a century later, we are working on issues and organizing women. Oh, Human Rights Council. That's what I forgot.
Okay.
We have 5 human rights councils in Georgia. And I think there are 4 in Mississippi and 4 in Alabama. And these are women who stay on top of issues in their county. And then we have to get training to them and so forth, and help them on whatever they want to highlight to work on.
Great.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And there's another project too. I need to quickly mention it to you.
Please.
We were given a former Winn-Dixie store building. When the company closed the store, and then they thought they could sell it, they didn't. And a couple of years later, they called me and they wanted to gift it to our nonprofit. It's in a major location. When I walked in that building, it was empty. I'm going, oh my goodness, it's nearly 47,000 square feet.
Wow. Wow.
And so what do we do with this? We
District.
we actually partnered with the hospital and a local community development financial institution to look at the plans for this particular facility. The hospital doesn't have a presence in that area of Albany. The largest number of deaths from COVID happened in that area.
Wow.
So actually looking at, it's so difficult to raise all of this money. The thing that made it so expensive for us is that FEMA, because it's in a flood zone, 500-year flood, no water got in it, but they are making us add a foot to the floor, and that's what has made it so so expensive. So we were looking at $15 million, and we actually got an award from HUD at 2. Truist Bank gave us $1 million. We have a group with New Market Tax Credit. We still have a gap of about $4 million that we're trying to come up with, but it's a major project.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
this area, it wasn't one I was looking for, because we had this major project with the land. But hey, it's a gift, and we need to make the most of it.
When would you like to see that start, provided you get all the funds?
Yeah, we were hoping this fall we could
Okay.
at least get started on the construction, but I don't see the money yet.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it would be great if we didn't go into another year, because after it takes so long, people start thinking this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And but it's a major project. No other project exactly like this has been designed. That's why Truist was so interested when they
Right.
saw what we were
Wow,
trying to do.
congratulations. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Well, we've got I guess maybe one last question, unless just in terms of the collective community, what are some other conversations that you think that we should be having to move things forward, either to help things change a little bit more? Maybe it's just women, whatever your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, one thing that's really bothering me and scary for me is the fact that they're trying to erase our history. And I really think we've got to do more there. I didn't tell you that at this place, we didn't know the history of the land that we purchased, but we learned afterward that it was once owned by the largest slave owner and the wealthiest man in the state of Georgia.
Wow.
Back at that time. He had 9 plantations and held the largest number of slaves at this site. So after his son's death, his son died in 1858, they sold 150 slaves. We have the ad from that plantation at the courthouse steps in Albany on December the 29th, 1859. This is a major site for being able to bring people on and help them understand that history. It's not something for us to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
Right.
It's something for us to be proud of at this point, that we've been able to take that from slave ownership to descendants of slaves.
Yeah.
And all of the things that we can do and make happen from this site. Now, there are some people who have come, and was told they are traumatized to get there and learn that this was a slave plantation. So we actually have a sign that we put up when we have a large crowd that says, this land was once owned by the largest slave owner and the wealthiest man in Georgia, and is now in the hands of descendants of slaves. So we are trying to do all of the right things here, and there's so much we could do. It takes a lot of money to do what we're doing. And someone told me what I read too, that one of the organizations that's an organization of community land trusts got $100 million from the Mackenzie Scott lady. I said, I wish you could have sent a little of that idea started.
Right.
But there's so much we attract people from all over when they learn of the history and of what we're trying to do here. But I'm concerned that our children, I spoke over at Albany State about 2 weeks ago, I think. I'm speaking to a class, and something just told me, because I did it once before, and I said, how many of you have heard of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee? Not one. Not one in that class.
Yeah.
You know, Albany played a major role in the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
There's no way
Yeah.
students graduate from that school without having some of that history.
Yeah.
So if you don't know it, you know, where are we going? What are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
There are many, many more things, but that one bothers me because it'll be hard to get our children to want to do things if they don't know where we came from.
Right.
Yeah.
And can't honor that.
Yeah, it's very important, those conversations, that education. And, you know, I teach African American history and African American community development at John Jay. And my students are always so excited and thankful to learn and to have the words to articulate, you know, not just what we suffered, but the resistance we did and, you know,
Yes.
and what we learned about agency and resistance and continuing, right? But also having the language to understand those structural issues as opposed to just always saying, oh, that's unfair, always seeing themselves as victims. But now understanding the structural violence and what the structures are makes a big difference.
Yes.
Wow.
We have a job to do. We really have
Yeah,
a
it's
job.
continuing. Yeah, we just have to keep it going.
Yeah.
How else can folks support or learn more about Sherrod Institute, Shirley, or what?
The SherrodInstitute.org.
Okay.
And you can see the property. It's a beautiful site. I mean, you just to think where we came from, what we lost. And I always say they took 6,000 acres from us, and God gave us this place intact. That man we paid $4.5 million, but he spent $3 million just restoring that big antebellum house.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Doctor, you got any?
Come and visit.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
I was going to ask you, are you taking visitors? Yeah, we'll have to get a learning journey out there.
Yes. Now, there's one major thing happening on May the 16th. For the last 2 years, I have been serving on the USDA Equity Commission. Biden appointed an equity commission to look at systemic racism within USDA. And on the 22nd of February, we presented that report to VILSAC. So that was the National Equity Summit. And at that point, they had planned 5. Others are trying to plan others, but 5 equity summits. So I'll go to Detroit next week because that's the first one. And then there's one at the University of Texas. I think it's in April. And then we're having one here on May the 16th. I can't officially announce it yet, but it's the only one that VILSAC will attend. So so that's here. I think it's Philadelphia and Oregon, where the other official ones are.
Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
That sounds wonderful.
All right.
So yeah, we'll close it up. I just want to say thank you so much. You know, you're just a fountain, not just of knowledge, but of action, right? It's just incredible to hear about your 60 years of action, and so grateful for you. And I love, you know, there's a million lessons, right? But especially the lessons about how we're organizers, right? So we have to combine the politics, the economics, the women's rights, all the relationship building. We keep hearing it over and over again, all the interviews we've been doing, the relationship building, the organizing, just it's all under and above everything we do. So thank you for reminding us of that. Thank you for all you've done and for being so eloquent and helping us to understand your journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will ditto that. Thank you, Ms. Sherrod, for being with us today. And we'll continue celebrating you beyond Women's History Month. We'll get out to that farm as well. All right. Thanks, everyone, for watching today. We want you to continue to take care and be well. And we will see you next on our next episode of Black Women in Cooperation, Her Story in Black.
Got a co-op poppin', we on a paper route. We got a co-op poppin', we spread that paper out. We got a co-op poppin', building communities.